Mireille sat on her wooden porch, watching the sun disappear behind the tall mountains. The old woman pulled her thick blanket closer around her shoulders as the evening air grew cold. Her small cottage stood alone at the edge of the village, surrounded by pine trees that whispered in the wind. At 72 years old, Mireille had lived in this house for most of her life. Her husband had died 5 years ago, and her children lived far away in the big city. She spent her days tending to her small vegetable garden and her evenings writing poems in an old notebook. The poems helped her feel less lonely. The village of Diesen was quiet and peaceful. Only 40 families lived there, scattered across the mountain valley. Most people knew each other since childhood. Mireille liked the quietness, even though sometimes she wished for more company. Tonight felt different somehow. The air seemed to hum with strange energy. Mireille looked up at the clear sky filled with bright stars. Full moon cast silver light. Across her garden, where tomatoes and peppers grew in neat rows, she opened her notebook and began writing a new poem about moonlight and memories. The words flowed easily from her pen. Writing always made her feel better, like her thoughts had somewhere to go instead of just spinning around in her head. A sudden flash of light made her look up. A streak of fire shot across the sky, much brighter than any shooting star she had ever seen. The burning object moved slowly, leaving a trail of sparks behind it. Mireille watched in amazement as it disappeared behind the forest that covered the mountain behind her house. A few seconds later, the ground shook beneath her feet. The wooden porch creaked and groaned. Her teacup rattled on the small table beside her chair. The rumbling sound echoed through the valley like thunder, but much deeper and longer. Mireille stood up, her heart beating fast. She had lived through many storms and small earthquakes, but this felt different. The air itself seemed to vibrate with an odd energy that made her skin tingle. From the forest came a strange orange glow, flickering between the dark trees. It was not like fire. Fire danced and moved quickly. This light pulsed slowly, like a giant heartbeat made of light. Mireille knew she should stay inside and wait until morning. She was an old woman, and the forest path was difficult even in daylight, but something pulled at her heart. The light looked sad somehow, like it was calling for help. She went inside and put on her warmest coat and boots. She took her small flashlight and walking stick. Before leaving, she looked around her simple home. The walls were covered with photos of her family and her late husband. Her poetry book sat on the shelf next to the window. If something dangerous had crashed in the forest, she should call the police. But the nearest phone was in the village center, a 20-minute walk away. By the time help arrived, it might be too late for whatever was making that strange light. The forest path was narrow and rocky. Mireille had walked it many times to collect mushrooms and wild vegetables. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, showing familiar rocks and tree roots. The orange glow grew brighter as she climbed higher up the mountain. After walking for 15 minutes, she reached a small clearing where she sometimes came to watch birds. But tonight the clearing looked completely different. A deep crater had been carved into the earth, about 10 feet wide and 3 feet deep. The hole glowed with soft orange light that seemed to come from the ground itself. Strange metal pieces lay scattered around the crater. They looked like parts of some kind of vehicle, but unlike anything Mireille had ever seen. The metal was smooth and curved with patterns that seemed to shift and change when she was not looking directly at them. At the bottom of the crater, she saw 3 small shapes huddled together. At first she thought they were injured animals, maybe young deer or large cats. But as she moved closer, her flashlight revealed something that made her gasp. The creatures looked like tiny. They were about the size of house cats, with scales that shimmered between blue and green. Small wings, torn and damaged, lay folded against their sides. Their long necks ended in delicate heads with large, intelligent eyes that reflected her flashlight beam. One of the creatures, slightly larger than the others, lifted its head and looked at her. Its eyes were the color of deep ocean water, filled with pain and fear. It made a soft sound, like wind chimes, mixed with a kitten's meow. Mireille felt her heart break. These beautiful creatures were hurt and scared. She could see dark stains on their scales that looked like blood. Their breathing was quick and shallow, like they were struggling to get enough air. She climbed carefully into the crater. The orange glow came from strange crystals embedded in the earth around the crash site. The crystals were warm to the touch and hummed with gentle energy. The largest creature watched her approach, but did not try to move away. It was too weak or too hurt to run. The other two were smaller and seemed to be unconscious. Their scales were paler, and they barely moved at all. Murray knelt beside them and spoke softly. "Hello, little ones, I will not hurt you. I want to help." The creature that was awake tilted its head as if trying to understand her words. Its eyes were so expressive, so full of intelligence, that Murray felt like she was looking at a person, not an animal. She reached out slowly, letting the creature see her hand. After a moment, it did not pull away when she gently touched its head. Its scales were warm and surprisingly soft, like silk that had been left in the sun. "You are hurt," she whispered. "I do not know what you are or where you came from, but I can see you need help." The creature made that wind chime sound again, softer this time. Somehow Murray understood it was trying to thank her. She looked at the three injured beings and made a decision. They were too heavy for her to carry all at once, but she could not leave them here. The night was getting colder, and she could hear wolves howling in the distance. Carefully, she picked up the smallest creature. It was lighter than she expected, but its breathing was very weak. She wrapped it in her scarf and climbed out of the crater. The walk back to her cottage would take longer while carrying passengers, but she would make as many trips as needed. As she carried the first creature home, Murray wondered what she had gotten herself into. Not looking down at the small dragon-like being in her arms, she knew she had made the right choice. Whatever these creatures were, wherever they came from, they needed help. And helping others was something Murray had always done, even when it was difficult. The cottage lights welcomed her home as she prepared to save 3 lives that had fallen from the stars. Murray made 3 trips to the forest crater that night. Each time she carried one of the small dragon creatures back to her cottage. By the time she brought the last one home, the sun was beginning to rise over the mountains. Inside her small house, she had prepared a warm place for them near the old wood stove. She used her softest blankets and pillows to make a comfortable nest. The 3 creatures lay close together, their breathing slow and difficult. The largest one, which Murray decided to call Jai, was still awake. Its ocean blue eyes followed her movements around the room. The other 2 remained unconscious. She named them Nuri and Balm, after the spring flowers that grew in her garden. Murray had no idea how to help alien creatures, but she knew about caring for sick animals. Over the years, she had rescued injured birds, stray cats, and even a young deer with a broken leg. She would use the same gentle methods. First, she examined their wounds. Dark burns covered parts of their scales, probably from the crash. Their wings had tears that looked painful. Most worrying, they all seemed to have trouble breathing Earth's air. She boiled water and made solution with healing herbs from her garden. Chamomile for calming, ginger for strength, and mint for easier breathing. She had used these same herbs to help her husband when he was sick. Gently she cleaned their wounds with soft cloth and the herbal water, which I made soft sounds but did not try to pull away. The creature seemed to understand she was helping. As she worked, something strange happened. Images began appearing in her mind. Not thoughts or words, but pictures that felt like memories. She saw flashes of a beautiful world with 2 suns and crystal cities. She saw these dragon creatures flying in great flocks across purple skies. Then came darker images. Massive ships with sharp edges attacking the crystal cities. Explosions and fire. The dragon creatures fleeing in terror, their home world burning. And breaking apart, Murray gasped and stepped back. The images stopped immediately. Jai was looking at her with those intelligent eyes, and somehow she knew the creature had shared those memories with her. "You showed me your home," she whispered. "It was beautiful. I am sorry about what happened." Jai made a series of soft sounds that almost seemed like words. In her mind, Murray caught a glimpse of more images. 3 young creatures hiding in a damaged ship, fear and loneliness. A desperate search for something important. Over the next few days, Mireille devoted herself to caring for her strange guests. She fed them small amounts of honey mixed with water, which they seemed able to digest. She kept them warm and spoke to them softly while she worked in her garden or cooked her meals. Slowly, Nuri and Baum began to wake up. They were smaller than Jai and seemed much younger. Their scales were lighter in color, more silver than blue-green. When they first saw Mireille, they hid behind Jai, making frightened chirping sounds. But Jai communicated with them somehow, and soon they relaxed. Within a week, all 3 creatures were moving around the cottage, exploring everything with curious eyes. Mireille discovered they were incredibly intelligent. They learned to open doors, understood when she called their names, and even seemed to recognize different objects. When she showed them her poetry books, they examined the pages with great interest, as if they could understand writing. The most amazing discovery came one evening when Mireille was reading her poems aloud. She often did this in the evenings, sitting by the window with her notebook. The sound of her own voice reading her words about love, loss, and hope made her feel less alone. That night, she read a poem about finding beauty in simple things. She noticed the 3 creatures had gathered around her chair. They sat perfectly still, their large eyes fixed on her face. The room grew quiet except for her voice and the gentle crackling of the wood stove. When she finished the poem, something wonderful happened. The air around them began to shimmer with soft light. It was not the orange glow from the crash site, but something gentler, like moonlight made visible. The creatures began to make harmonious sounds together, like singing without words. The light grew brighter, and Mireille felt a warm, peaceful feeling spread through her chest. Somehow, the combination of her poetry and their response had created something beautiful. More images flowed into her mind. But these were different from the first ones. She saw herself through their eyes, an old woman with kind hands and a gentle voice. She saw how her poems appeared to them, not as words, but as colors and feelings that danced in the air. Then she understood something amazing. These creatures, these Valkyrie, as they called themselves, were not just intelligent. They were artists and scholars, keepers of stories and wisdom from across the galaxy. They had been searching for something called the Archive of Souls, a place where the memories of lost civilizations were kept safe, but their ship had been damaged while escaping from the Kethany, a race of conquerors who destroyed worlds for pleasure. The 3 young Valkyrie were the last survivors of their clutch, orphaned when their home was destroyed. Mireille felt tears running down her cheeks. These beautiful creatures had lost everything, just like she had lost her husband and felt alone in the world. But somehow they had found each other. From that night forward, the evening poetry reading became a special ritual. Mireille would sit with her 3 guests, reading her simple poems about daily life, memories, and dreams. The Valkyrie would respond. With their musical sounds and the gentle light that made the whole cottage feel magical, the creatures began to heal faster. Their wounds closed, their breathing became easier, and their scales regained their bright colors. More importantly, the sadness in their eyes began to fade, replaced by something that looked like hope. Mireille also felt herself changing. The loneliness that had weighed on her heart since her husband's death was lifting. She had purpose again. Caring for these remarkable beings who had somehow chosen to trust her, she began writing new poems, inspired by their presence. Verses about friendship crossing the stars, about finding family in unexpected places, about the power of kindness to heal even the deepest wounds. The Valkyrie seemed to understand every word, even though they could not speak her language. Their telepathic abilities allowed them to feel the emotions behind her words, the love and hope that she put into every line. As the weeks passed, Mireille realized that while she was helping them recover from their physical injuries, they were helping her heal from something deeper. The 3 dragon creatures had brought magic back into her quiet life, and she had given them something they had lost, a sense of home and safety. But late at night, when she thought they were sleeping, she sometimes saw them looking up at the stars through her window. She knew they were still searching for the Archive of Souls, still carrying the weight of their lost world. She also knew that their peaceful time together would not last forever. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the Kithani were still hunting them. 3 months had passed since the crash. Moray's cottage had become a peaceful home for the 3 Valkyrie. Jai, Nuri, and Bomb had grown stronger and healthier. Their scales now shimmered with bright colors, and they could fly short distances. Around the garden, the creatures had learned to help with simple tasks. Jai could carry small tools in his claws. Nuri and Bomb worked together to water the plants. The villagers had noticed Moray seemed happier lately, though she had not told anyone about her special guests. One morning, while Moray was hanging laundry outside, Jai suddenly froze. His scales turned pale, and he made a sharp warning sound. Nuri and Bomb immediately flew to hide behind the cottage. "What is wrong?" Moray asked. But Jai was already pushing her toward the house with his head. High above, something glinted in the clear blue sky. At first, it looked like a silver star, but it was moving too fast and too purposefully. More silver dots appeared, forming a pattern against the sky. Jai shared an image with Moray's mind. She saw massive ships with sharp edges and dark metal, the same ships from the memories of their destroyed homeworld. The Kithani had found them. Fear filled Moray's heart, but she forced herself to stay calm. She gathered the 3 creatures and brought them inside. They huddled together in their favorite spot near the wood stove, trembling with terror. "Do not worry," Moray said softly. "I will not let them hurt you." But even as she spoke, she wondered what an old woman could do against alien warships. Far above Earth, the Kithani fleet had indeed arrived. Commander Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the blue and green planet below. His red eyes glowed with satisfaction. The hunt was almost over. "The Valkyrie life signs are confirmed on the surface," reported his officer, hiding in the northern mountain region. Vextar smiled, showing sharp teeth. "The Kithani were a proud warrior race who had conquered dozens of worlds. They believed that only the strong deserved to survive, and they took pleasure in destroying anything beautiful or peaceful. "Prepare the landing ships," Vextar commanded. "We will take the Valkyrie alive and use them to find the Archive of Souls. Then we will destroy them slowly, as we should have done to their entire species." But as the Kithani prepared to attack, something unexpected happened. Warning signals began flashing across every ship's control panels. A massive fleet of alien vessels appeared around Earth, surrounding the Kithani ships. "Commander," the officer said nervously, "we are being contacted by the Galactic Preservation Council." Vextar's smile faded. The Galactic Preservation Council was older and more powerful than the Kithani Empire. They rarely interfered in conflicts, but when they did, even the mighty Kithani had to listen. A holographic image appeared on the bridge. Admiral Thane, a tall being with silver skin and ancient eyes, looked directly at Vextar. Behind him stood representatives from dozens of different alien species. "Commander Vextar," Admiral Thane said in a voice like distant thunder, "you are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately. The Valkyrie are our rightful prey," Vextar growled. "We have hunted them across the galaxy. You have no right to interfere. The Valkyrie are under the protection of a human," Admiral Thane replied. "That changes everything." "A human?" Vextar laughed. "Humans are a primitive species. They've barely learned to travel between planets. What power do they have?" Admiral Thane's expression grew serious. "You forget the most important law in the galaxy, Commander. The law that has kept peace for 1,000 years. You don't hurt humans." Every alien species in the galaxy knew this law. It had been established after the first contact with humanity, when explorers discovered something unique about the young species. Humans possessed an unusual ability to create hope and beauty, even in the darkest times. The first alien visitors had been amazed by human art, music, and stories. They found that human creativity could heal psychological wounds that had troubled their species for centuries. Human compassion could bridge differences between alien races that had been enemies for millennia. The Galactic Preservation Council had declared humanity a protected species. Any race that harmed humans would face the combined might of the entire galaxy. The law had been tested only once, when a species called the Vrex had attacked a human colony. At the Vrex Empire had been completely destroyed within days. But we are not attacking humans, Vexstar protested. We only want the Valkyrie. The Valkyrie are being protected by a human, Admiral Thane repeated. Harm them, and you harm her. The law is clear. Vexstar felt his confidence cracking. The Kethani were powerful, but they could not fight the entire galaxy. Yet he had spent years hunting these last Valkyrie. His pride would not let him give up so easily. We will not harm the human, he said carefully. But we will destroy everything around her until she gives up the Valkyrie to save her own kind. Admiral Thane's eyes flashed with anger. That would still be harming humans, Commander. You would be forcing them to choose between their safety and their principles. The law forbids this. Other alien ships began arriving in Earth's orbit. The Zephyrian Council, masters of energy weapons, the Crystalline Collective who could manipulate matter itself, the Void Singers, whose songs could shatter planets. Species that had not spoken to each other for centuries were united in their determination to protect humanity. Down on Earth, Marae felt the tension in the air. The Valkyrie were sharing more images with her, showing her the great fleets gathered above her world. She saw the alien commanders arguing, debating her fate and that of her 3 friends. They are afraid to hurt humans, she realized. But why? Jai showed her more images. She saw humans throughout the galaxy working as teachers, healers, and artists. She saw alien children learning human songs. She saw diplomats from warring species sitting together, listening to human stories about forgiveness and second chances. Somehow, without even knowing it, humanity had become the galaxy's source of hope. Their ability to find beauty in simple things, to show kindness to strangers, to keep trying even when everything seemed hopeless, had touched every corner of the universe. We are not special, Marae whispered. We are just people trying to do good. But that was exactly what made humans special. In a galaxy full of advanced technology and powerful weapons, humanity's simple goodness was the rarest and most valuable thing of all. Above Earth, the standoff continued. Vexstar faced an impossible choice. He could retreat and lose face before his own people, or he could risk everything in a fight he could not win. The human is old and alone, he said finally. Surely she cannot protect the Valkyrie forever. We will wait. Time is on our side. But Admiral Thane smiled, an expression that did not reach his ancient eyes. Time, Commander, belongs to those who know how to use it wisely. Humans have always been very wise about the things that matter most. As the great ships waited in the darkness of space, Marae continued her evening routine. She sat with Jai, Nuri, and Bomb, reading her poetry by moonlight. Her simple words about love, courage, and hope drifted up into the night sky, carrying with them the power to change the fate of the galaxy. She did not know that her voice was being heard across the stars, or that alien beings were listening to her poems with wonder and growing understanding. She only knew that she had 3 friends who needed her protection. She would not let them down. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and it would be fought not with weapons or technology, but with the simple power of human kindness. 2 weeks had passed since the alien fleets arrived above Earth. The people of Deson Village had begun to notice strange lights in the sky at night. Some thought they were new satellites. Others whispered about UFOs. But only Marae knew the truth. The Valkyrie had grown more anxious each day. He could sense the Kethani ships waiting in space, like wolves circling a campfire. Jai spent hours staring at the sky, his scales flickering between blue and gray with worry. Marae tried to keep their daily routine normal. She read poetry every evening, tended her garden, and cooked simple meals. But she could feel the tension, building like a storm about to break. The break came on a Tuesday morning. Commander Vexstar had grown tired of waiting. His warriors were restless, and the other Kethani commanders were beginning to question his leadership. He needed to act, but he also needed to be clever about it. We cannot directly attack the human, he told his officers, but we can force her to make a choice. From his flagship, Vexstar sent a message to every communication device in Deson Village. Televisions, radios, and phones suddenly displayed. The same terrifying image, a massive alien warship hovering in space, its weapons pointing toward Earth. People of this mountain village, Vextar's voice echoed through every speaker. You are harboring enemies of the Kethany Empire. 3 alien criminals are hiding among you. You have 1 day to surrender them, or we will destroy your village, to cleanse it of their presence. The message repeated in perfect Korean, then in every other Earth language. The alien commander's red eyes stared from every screen, promising death and destruction. Panic spread through the village like wildfire. Families ran from their homes, loading cars with their most precious belongings. Children cried in their mother's arms. The elderly villagers sat in stunned silence, unable to believe what they had heard, but not everyone ran. Donghae, the village elder, was 85 years old. He had lived through wars and disasters, and he knew that running in panic only made things worse. Instead, he walked slowly to Murray's cottage, his cane tapping on the rocky path. Behind him came others. Sulji, the young schoolteacher, carried her infant son. Jinwoo, who ran the village store, brought his teenage daughter. One by one, other villagers followed. They found Mireille sitting on her porch, calm and peaceful. The 3 Valkyrie were visible beside her, no longer hiding. Their scales glowed softly in the morning light, and their large eyes showed both fear and determination. So, these are the aliens? Donghae said quietly. He looked at Jainuri and Bomb with curiosity rather than fear. They are smaller than I expected. They are just children, Murray said. They lost their families and their home. They came here looking for safety. Sulji stepped forward, still holding her baby. The news says they are criminals. Look at them, Murray replied. Do they look like criminals to you? The villagers stared at the 3 dragon creatures. Jai moved protectively in front of his younger companions, but he did not snarl or threaten. Instead, he bowed his head slightly, as if asking for understanding. Are afraid? Little Yuna whispered. She was only 8 years old, but she could see the fear in the creature's eyes. They are scared like I get scared during thunderstorms. The aliens in the sky want to hurt them, Jinwoo said. They want us to give them up. And if we do not? Asked Seulgi.Mirae, looked at each face in turn. These were good people, her neighbors. And friends, they had their own families to protect. She could not ask them to risk everything for 3 alien creatures they had never seen before. You should leave, she said softly. Take your families and go to the next village. I will stay here with them, Donghae said firmly. We will not abandon you. But your families will be safe, Sulji interrupted.
Yes.
Because we are not giving up anyone to bullies, human or alien. More villagers arrived throughout the day. Instead of fleeing, they came to see what was happening. Word spread quickly through the small community. The old woman who lived alone had been caring for 3 alien children, those space monsters wanted. To destroy the village to get them, by evening, almost the entire village had gathered around Moray's cottage. They brought food, blankets, and tools. They set up a protective circle around the house, not with weapons, but with their presence. This is foolish, some said. We should give up the aliens and save ourselves. But others disagreed. Mireille has helped all of us at some time. When my husband was sick, she brought soup every day. When the flood damaged the school, she donated money for repairs. Now she needs our help. The debate continued, but most people stayed. They could not explain why, but something about the 3 small creatures touched their hearts. Maybe it was the way they huddled together for comfort. Maybe it was how they seemed to understand human emotions. Or maybe it was simply that they were innocent beings who needed protection. As night fell, Mireille sat on her porch as usual, her poetry book in her lap. But now, she was surrounded by her neighbors. The Valkyrie sat beside her, their scales glowing softly in the moonlight. Tonight, I will read a poem about courage, Mireille announced. About ordinary people who do extraordinary things. She opened her book and began to read. Her voice carried across the quiet gathering, speaking of heroes who were not knights or warriors, but farmers and teachers and storekeepers who chose to do what was right instead of what was easy. as she read something magical happened. The Valkyrie began their harmonious singing, and the soft light surrounded the entire gathering. The villagers felt a warm, peaceful feeling spread through their hearts. Fear faded away, replaced by a sense of purpose and unity. Above them, in the cold darkness of space, the alien fleets watched and waited. Advanced sensors recorded every word of Moray's poetry, every note of the Valkyrie's song. The readings were transmitted to ships throughout the galaxy. On the Kethany flagship, Commander Vexstar studied the reports with growing confusion. Scientists could not explain what they were seeing. The humans' life signs showed no fear, no anger, no desire for conflict. Instead, they radiated something the Kethany had never encountered: pure, selfless love. They are willing to die for creatures they barely know, one officer reported. Why would they do this? Vexstar had no answer. But in Kethany culture, individuals fought only for themselves and their immediate family. The idea of risking everything for strangers was completely foreign to them. But Admiral Thane, watching from his ship, understood perfectly. He had studied humans for decades, and he knew their greatest strength was not their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to see the good in others and to act on that vision, even when it cost them everything. "The test has begun," he murmured to his officers. "Now we will see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable heart." Myray finished her poem and closed her book. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, surrounded by friends and the gentle glow of 3 alien children, she felt ready for whatever came next. The greatest test of the galactic law was about to begin, and it would be decided not by weapons or technology, but by the simple courage of ordinary people who refused to let fear win. The deadline given by Commander Vexstar was only hours away. Dawn light painted the mountains pink and gold, but the beauty of the morning felt strange against the fear that hung in the air. Myray woke early, as she always did, around her cottage. The villagers had spent the night in sleeping bags and blankets. Some had gone home to check on family members, but most had stayed. They moved quietly, making breakfast on small camp stoves and sharing coffee from thermos bottles. The 3 Valkyrie had barely slept. They stayed close to Myray, their scales pale with worry. Through their telepathic connection, they could sense the Kethany ships above, waiting like hungry predators. "I am sorry," Jai whispered into Moray's mind, his thoughts heavy with guilt. "We brought danger to your people. We should leave." "No," Myray said firmly, speaking aloud so the villagers could hear. "You are part of our family now. Families do not abandon each other." Donghae nodded from his chair nearby. "She is right. We have made our choice." Ow. But as the morning progressed, the tension grew unbearable.
Ow.
Some villagers began to have second thoughts. They looked at their children and wondered if they were doing the right thing. The alien commander had promised to destroy the village. What if he kept his word? At exactly noon, Commander Vexstar's voice echoed through the village again. "Your time is up," he announced. "You have chosen to protect the enemies of the Kethane Empire. Now you will face the consequences." High above, the Kethany warships powered up their weapons. Energy beams began to gather, preparing to strike. But just as Vexstar was about to give the final order, something unexpected happened. The Valkyrie began to sing. It started with just Jai, a low, melodious sound that seemed to come from deep in his chest. Then Nuri and Baum joined in, their higher voices creating harmony. The sound was unlike anything the humans had ever heard, beautiful and haunting at the same time. Myray felt compelled to respond. She opened her poetry book and began to read, her voice blending with the Valkyrie's song. The words she spoke were simple, about finding light in darkness and hope in despair. But combined with the aliens' telepathic abilities, something extraordinary began to happen. The Valkyrie's psychic powers, amplified by the emotional depth of Moray's poetry, began to resonate across space and time. The combined force of human creativity and alien telepathy created waves of energy that rippled outward from the small mountain village in space. The alien fleets detected the strange phenomenon. Their instruments showed energy readings unlike anything in their databases. The waves were not destructive like weapons, but transformative, carrying patterns of thought and emotion across vast distances. On the Kethany flagship, the crew began to experience something they had never felt before. As the energy waves reached them, they started to see images in their minds. It's not their own memories, but glimpses of other lives, so their perspectives. A young Kethony warrior suddenly saw through the eyes of a human child, feeling the pure joy of playing in a garden. Another experienced the grief of an elderly woman mourning her lost husband, but also her determination to keep living and helping others. Commander Vexstar tried to resist, but the images kept coming. He saw Moray's life through her own eyes, her struggles and losses, her small acts of kindness that had touched so many lives. He saw the three Valkyrie as they really were, not enemies but frightened children seeking safety. "What is this?" he demanded, but his voice lacked its usual strength. The answer came from an unexpected source. Throughout the galaxy, ancient beings began to stir. Eternal scribes, who had been sleeping in dimensions between reality, suddenly awakened. They had been waiting for thousands of years for something important to happen. Now they sensed it. Admiral Thane received a message. From the scribe's leader, a being so old that stars had been born and died during its lifetime. "The convergence begins," the message said. "The human's words combined with Valkyrie psychic resonance are creating new forms of artistic expression. This art can heal wounds that have festered for millennia." Throughout the galaxy, other species began to feel the effects. On planets where wars had raged for centuries, soldiers suddenly stopped fighting as they experienced their enemy's pain and fear. Ancient grudges began to dissolve as beings understood for the first time how their actions affected others. In the Kethany fleet, the transformation was most dramatic. These proud warriors, who had spent their lives conquering and destroying, suddenly felt the weight of all the suffering they had caused. But instead of despair, they also felt something else, the possibility of redemption. Commander Vexstar fell to his knees on his ship's bridge. In his mind, he saw every world the Kethany had destroyed, every life they had ended. But he also saw something else, the potential for change, for becoming something better. "Stand down all weapons," he whispered. "Commander," his officers asked in confusion. "Said stand down," Vexstar repeated, his voice growing stronger. "We will not fire on the humans." Down on Earth, Moray continued reading her poetry, unaware of the cosmic changes her words were creating. She spoke of forgiveness, of second chances, of the belief that even the worst people could choose to become better. The Valkyrie song grew more complex, her telepathic abilities reaching further than ever before. They were not just sharing the poetry with nearby minds, but broadcasting it across the galaxy, translated into the thoughts and emotions of countless different species. On a distant world, survivors of a Kethany attack felt the waves of healing energy. Their hatred began to transform into something like understanding. They saw that their attackers had been driven by fear and pain, and that revenge would only create more suffering. In the crystal cities of the Zephyrian Council, beings who had not felt emotion for centuries suddenly remembered what it meant to hope. The Void Singers, whose own songs could destroy planets, heard in the combined human Valkyrie performance a new kind of music that created rather than destroyed. The energy waves continued to spread, carrying with them the simple message of Moray's poetry, that love was stronger than fear, that kindness could triumph over cruelty, that every being deserved a chance to change and grow. But the most remarkable change was happening in the Valkyrie themselves. As they sang with Moray, sharing her words with the galaxy, they began to realize something profound. They had been searching for the Archive of Souls, a place where the wisdom of lost civilizations was stored. But the archive was not a place at all, it was a state of being, a moment when different species shared their deepest truths with each other. And right now, in a small cottage on a distant planet, surrounded by ordinary humans who had chosen to act with extraordinary courage, the Archive of Souls was being born. The three young Valkyrie looked at each other with wonder in their eyes. They had found what they were looking for, not in some distant star system, but in the kindness of an old woman who had offered them nothing but poetry under the moonlight. As the sun set over the mountains, the cosmic transformation continued. The galaxy would never be the same, and it had all started with simple words spoken by a simple woman who believed in the power of doing what was right. The greatest battle in galactic history was ending, and it had been won not through violence, but through the unstoppable force of human compassion, combined with the wisdom of the stars.